Hey, if you're a fan of Led Zeppelin, especially kind of the history of the band, I think you're going to enjoy what I have for you here today. What we do on this channel a lot is we go back and we find old newspaper articles, record reviews, concert reviews, that kind of thing. And I found something kind of different, kind of unusual this time. And what it is it's as you can see from the title of this article, it says Led Zeppelin nears its 9th year of flight. And what this person did, this article's from 1977. And what this person did is they kind of went back and just did a little story kind of explaining the story of Led Zeppelin, from their beginning, actually even back to the Yardbirds, from then until this moment in 1977, and just kind of tell the story. So I don't know if you're really into Zeppelin, if there'll be anything super new for you in here. Maybe there will be. It's always hard to say. I love reading these things because a lot of times I'm like, you know what? For some reason, I missed that over the years. But even so, it's just kind of cool to go back and listen to what people were saying and how they were saying it and the stories they were telling back then. And so I think you're going to enjoy listening to this article. Now, as you see on the screen there, they've got a picture of the band there. But they also have a copy, a graphic of Led Zeppelin 1. And so I got Led Zeppelin 1 out here, an old copy of it for reference purposes. And this album ended up being such an important piece of just popular music history. Just just seeing this thing, it's such a big deal what they did when this album came out. And I don't know that anybody really understood the massive impact that this record and this band was going to have, really, on Western civilization. I mean, they just had just such a huge impact. So anyway, I'm going to jump into this. Like I said, it's called Led Zeppelin Nears Its 9th Year of Flight. So here we go. The new Yardbirds were desperate. They needed a different name. Their appellation was too closely identified with the original Yardbirds, starring Eric Clapton, to permit sufficient artistic growth. They considered calling themselves the Whoopee Cushion. Another possibility was the Mad Dogs. Both were rejected. The name they finally settled on came from a remark the Who's drummer Keith Moon made after surveying the group's personnel. Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham would, in Moon's words, go over like a lead balloon. Playing off this ignominious comment, the new Yardbirds christened themselves Led Zeppelin. Less than a year later, Moon had to eat his lead balloon. Since its inception in 1968, Led Zeppelin has released 8 albums. Now remember again, this is on April 17th, 1977 when this article is being written. I didn't mention it's from the Cincinnati Enquirer. 2 of the 8 are double record sets. All 8 are platinum albums with sales of over 1 million units per LP. The quartet has sold over 25 million albums worldwide. And, that is such a... When you put that in perspective from the time, it's just shocking how many albums they moved and the impact they had all over the world. It's incredible. In 1973, Led Zeppelin's tours earned $30 million. Now, by the way, by 1973... they had already released all the way up through Houses of the Holy. So 1, 2, 3, and then the album that we call 4, and Houses of the Holy. All of those existed by the time they hit 1973. The next year, the band founded Swan Song Records. Bad Company, Maggie Bell, Pretty Things, and Page's friend Roy Harper joined Led Zeppelin in recording for the label. And we actually have another video on this channel where we talk about when Led Zeppelin was on a tour in Texas, when they went to a concert to actually see Bad Company in concert. So like it says here, Bad Company actually was on this label that they put together called Swan Song. And just for fun, for reference, I got Bad Company's first album out, just so you could see this. And there's the album cover, and on the inside there, this is the familiar Swan Song Records symbol that you'd see anyway. So this is Bad Company on Swan Song Records. This was the Led Zeppelin record label. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Whenever Led Zeppelin performs, its concerts sell out in advance. Tickets for the group's April 19th and 20th Riverfront Coliseum concerts went on sale March 22nd. 36,600 tickets, 18,300 per concert, were available. They were gone in 6 hours, a Cincinnati record. The guiding genius behind Led Zeppelin's popularity is Jimmy Page. He is the group's founder, leader, and lead guitarist, is the sole composer or a collaborator on all of the band's compositions, and has produced every album. Page objects to the Genius label. And then he says here, quote, "The term genius gets used far too loosely in rock and roll," he told Rolling Stone's Cameron Crowe. "When you hear the melodic structures of what classical musicians put together and you compare it to that of a rock and roll record, there's a hell of a long way rock and roll has to go. Rock and roll is folk music, street music. It isn't taught in school. It has to be picked up. You don't find geniuses in street musicians, but that doesn't mean to say you can't be really good." I love that quote so much. Rock and roll is folk music, street music. Anyway, I just thought that was so interesting. Being really good was what brought Page to the attention of the original Yardbirds. Before joining the group as its bass guitarist in July of 1966, Page earned a reputation as a talented session guitarist. Two of his session jobs were The Who's Magic Bus / The Who Sings My Generation album and Tom Jones' 1965 hit, It's Not Unusual. By the way, I love that song. Tom Jones, It's Not Unusual. It's so great. Page did not remain the Yardbirds bassist for long. The group's lead guitarist, Jeff Beck, Clapton's replacement, became ill, and the newest Yardbird took his place. Beck recovered and for a short time, the band had two lead guitarists. Beck quit the band in late 1966. Page became the Yardbirds' lone guitarist and remained with the group until its demise in July of 1968. The Yardbirds' death left Page with the group's name, advance bookings, and no musicians to play them. Ostensibly, out of the need to honor the Yardbirds' contracts, the guitarist formed the new Yardbirds. The first musician he tried to recruit into the group was Terry Reid. Page wanted Reid to be his lead vocalist. A weak-voiced singer from the Bob Dylan home for unpredictable phrasers, Reid had just embarked on a solo career. He still is playing, and they have a note here, he still is playing alone, and his latest album on ABC Records, Seed of Memory, has done nothing to alleviate his obscurity. Just so interesting to think about that what he was, these people that he was considering at the very beginning, because he had several different people in mind for this band. And it was almost by accident in some cases, like this, where he ended up with people that weren't his first choice. And you think, what would happen to this band if he hadn't have had the formula that he ended up putting together, which ended up being the thing that was so revolutionary. Just fascinating thinking about this. The risk of joining Page's fledgling group was too great for Reid. But out of his friendship with Page, he recommended an unknown singer harmonicist, Robert Plant. Sporting one of the most idiosyncratic voices in the history of rock, Plant instantly impressed Page. For the new Yardbirds drummer, Plant suggested John Bonham, a fellow Band of Joy member. And they kind of blow past that, but Robert Plant's band before Led Zeppelin was called Band of Joy. Anyway, that's what they're referring to here. And he was in that band with John Bonham. And so when he goes into this, but when the drummer that Page actually wanted wasn't available, then he ended up with Robert Plant's fellow band member. Page had B.J. Wilson, who eventually worked for Procol Harum, in mind. Wilson was unavailable, so the job went to Bonham. Again, it's just so interesting to me. These other people that he had in mind that for these positions, and he ended up with not the people he was planning, and yet the formula worked out. It's just so amazing thinking about how this fell into place. Bass guitarist, keyboardist John Paul Jones knew Page from his session work. Jones' pre-Led Zeppelin fame came from his arrangements for the Rolling Stones' She's a Rainbow and Donovan, Mellow Yellow, and Sunshine Superman. The new Yardbirds rehearsed in the fall of 1968 and fulfilled the original Yardbirds concert commitments in Scandinavia. The quartet returned to its home base, London, and prepared for its Led Zeppelin debut at the city's Marquee Club on October 18, 1968. 39 days after Led Zeppelin's premiere, Cream gave its last concert. The dissolution of Cream, while its popularity was on the ascent, left a void in the field of loud, heavy-rhythmed electric blues, which was soon to be filled by Led Zeppelin. This is not to say Led Zeppelin came in on Cream's coattails, but not having to compete with the trio of Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker did not hurt Page's group's chances for stardom. Again, it's so interesting how these almost accidental or fortuitous things happened that helped set the stage for Led Zeppelin to actually become what it was. It's just fascinating to me. Following Cream's lead, Led Zeppelin decided to concentrate on the larger and more lucrative American market. To aid in its conquest of the States, the group's manager, Peter Grant, a rotund Englishman, who in his pre-Led Zeppelin days wrestled professionally and acted as Robert Morley's double in films, wrangled a U.S. recording contract with Atlantic Records. And Peter Grant, he really did understand that vision, where let's not put out a whole bunch of hit songs and singles. This is album-oriented rock, and we're going to go conquer the United States with that. And you'll notice through Led Zeppelin's history, they rarely put out singles. It really was focused on, we are selling this band, we're selling albums, we're selling all this music, we're selling this attitude, this concept, this vision. And he was kind of a genius behind that, and it ended up really, really working out, obviously. Grant is to Led Zeppelin what Colonel Tom Parker is to Elvis Presley. He sold Atlantic Records on the group without a demo tape, which is fascinating thing here. Anyone who saw the Led Zeppelin film, The Song Remains the Same, knows how persuasive Grant can be. In the movie, he browbeat the manager of Madison Square Garden about the presence of unauthorized souvenir salesmen during the group's 1973 concert in the New York Hall. It was a piddling detail considering the millions the group had made from tours that year, but Grant, like Parker, makes sure his clients receive every penny called for in their contracts. And it's so funny. If you watch that movie and you see that scene where Peter Grant's this like big dude, intimidating presence, right? And you see him kind of going off on that guy at Madison Square Garden for selling, it looked like they were posters or something like that they were selling. And what's so ironic about it is he makes this comment about how they're trying to squeeze every nickel that they can out of Led Zeppelin. When what was so true about him is what they just said here, is that it was that Peter Grant was trying to get every penny that the band deserved. So he's accusing them of trying to squeeze every nickel while what he's really doing is getting every penny he possibly can for Led Zeppelin, which is one of the things that made him so great. And kind of like the comparison here to Colonel Tom Parker, because that's what he was with Elvis Presley. He really went to bat for him. I mean, Peter Grant was on tour with Led Zeppelin. He was there in these places. He was watching out for them the whole time. And the fact that he was this kind of a mountain of a man, he'd walk into these situations and he was intimidating and he would just take charge. And so he was such an important thing. And also, you realize how important he is, especially in that movie, Song Remains the Same, because as you recall, if you've seen that movie, each one of the guys in the band have their little dream sequences, their little fantasy sequences that they go into at different parts in the show. Remember how the movie starts. The movie starts with the sequence of who? Peter Grant. The whole opening sequence of that movie is this, it's kind of a mob hit, is what it is. And it's being led by Peter Grant. So in an interesting way, he even had his own fantasy sequence in that movie, just like all the band members did, because he was such an important part of that band. Even though he wasn't obviously a musician, he was a significant part of their success. Led Zeppelin, the quartet's first album, which is the one I have here, was recorded in 15 hours and released in January of 1969. The recording's material consisted of songs the group had written while it was the New Yardbirds and 2 numbers by bluesman Willie Dixon. I'm just going to flip it over here so you can see. And you'll look here, it's got Willie Dixon is You Shook Me right there, which is number 3 on that side. And then I Can't Quit You Baby, which is number 4 on side 2. And by the way, this I Can't Quit You Baby is just kind of an amazing blues number, of course, by Led Zeppelin on this album. But they re-recorded, they had well, I shouldn't say it that way. They had a different recording of that song that they put on Coda. And in my humble opinion, the version of I Can't Quit You Baby that's on the album Coda is actually better than this one. When you hear the beginning, the way Robert Plant starts the first words in that song, it's just, on Coda especially, it's so good. Anyway, just amazing stuff. The album was significant in revealing Page's talents as a guitarist and producer. Now, by the way, and you'll see that right there, produced by Jimmy Page. Bonham's drumming, Jones's bass work, and Plant's vocals. Always rated below Beck, Clapton, and Jimi Hendrix, Page showed he could improvise with the best on his Dazed and Confused solo. Over the years, he has maintained a consistent flair for improvising. While the Flame and Clapton solos faded in the mid-1970s, Page's continued to burn brightly. On Led Zeppelin's 6th album, and its first on the Swan Song label, Physical Graffiti, released in February of 1975, the quartet's 7th album, Presence, released a year later, and the group's most recent LP, the soundtrack from the film Song Remains the Same, which is what we were talking about a minute ago, recorded in concert in 1973, but released in October of 1976, his blues-based solos never rely on cliches and demonstrate the 33-year-old guitarist's knack for tension-building pauses and alternating fuzz tone and legato passages. Through Page's production, Bonham's drumming, and Jones's bass playing, the group wrote the book for the rhythm sections of heavy metal imitators like Black Sabbath. Page's production emphasizes the bass drum over the snare, tom-toms, and cymbals. At least once, every Led Zeppelin album, Bonham sounds like his track was recorded in an empty movie soundstage. And then the article continues on the next page, and you'll see here that the title on this page is Led Zeppelin Will Never Break Up. Bonham does not use snappy cymbal socks like Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts. Instead, he allows his cymbals to resonate, adding to the distorted sounds from Page's guitar. The full, indistinct notes of Jones's bass guitar fatten the sound of the band, giving it a brooding undercurrent. On top of the distorted guitar and thick rhythm is Plant's unusual voice. He can squeal like a banshee. Immigrant Song from Led Zeppelin III is a fine example. Or sing in a southern patois similar to bluesman Charlie Patton's, as he did on the untitled 4th album's closing selection, When the Levee Breaks. And I tell you something, that over the years, when I was a young kid and I first listened to Led Zeppelin 4, for whatever reason, that song, When the Levee Breaks, and the Battle of Evermore, as a kid, I didn't like either of those songs. And what's so funny now as an adult many decades later, those 2 songs might be my favorite songs on that album. I mean, When the Levee Breaks is such a powerful, amazing tune. You want to talk about a drum sound that has that sound that he's talking about being in a huge, I mean, it's so great. Okay. Plant's vocal dexterity has permitted Led Zeppelin's material to encompass sultry, Dog Day numbers like the Lemon Song off Led Zeppelin II, acoustic blues like Led Zeppelin III's Hats Off to Roy Harper, and the James Brown parody, The Crunge, from the 5th album, Houses of the Holy. The many magnificent skirmishes that have raged between Page's guitar and Plant's voice in the course of Led Zeppelin's recorded history climaxed on Physical Graffiti. In My Time of Dying, on the double record set's first side, was the realization of what Plant and Page had been working on since You Shook Me on Led Zeppelin. So that's what we were talking about here. You Shook Me off of this first album. And In My Time of Dying If you haven't listened to that recently, bust it out. That slide guitar, I mean, it's so great. And because it has that distortion, and then when Robert Plant comes in and starts singing over the top of it, and then it starts speeding up, and the song's like 11 minutes long, and it's so, it just the way it builds and moves, it's such an amazing thing, and that's his point here. This is kind of how he puts it, their realization and what they've been working on. It's really powerful. They were striving for a union of instrument and voice, which in turn would spawn a half-man, half-machine sound. And I think his point there is when you listen to that song, for a lot of it, Robert Plant is singing the melody kind of moving with the guitar, the sliding guitar that Jimmy Page is doing. So he's kind of singing right on top of it, and it does give you this really cool effect. Plant's In My Time of Dying vocal duplicated the tingling, fingernails against the blackboard tone produced by Page's bottleneck rubbing against the metal wrappings of his guitar strings. I love that. Plant, Page, Bonham, and Jones have no intention of disturbing their special blend of musicianship. Plant has frequently told the rock press that Led Zeppelin will never break up. Page expressed his contentment with the band in a Rolling Stone interview. I don't need to do a solo album, and neither does anybody else in the band. The chemistry is such that there's nobody in the background who's so frustrated that he has to bring out his own LPs. A group's a group after all, isn't it? And that's the end of the article. And of course, we all know how that ended, which was obviously very unfortunate, because then, of course, it was a few years later that John Bonham passed away after one more album, In Through the Outdoor. And then at that point, they basically, because each one of them was 25% of the whole, they just couldn't carry on. And then they just announced, we have to stop. And then from there, of course, Robert Plant went off and did do a bunch of solo things and what have you. But the impact that they left on the world, and what made this article so interesting to me is here they were in 1977, and they had made such a massive impact on the world at that point. You know, they look back and kind of, as it did there in the article, tell the story of where they'd come from, where they were at this point, and then their outlook. The outlook at that time was, we're just going to keep going. There's no reason for this to end. We're very fulfilled, and the impact that they made on the world at that point was significant. And it's so amazing because people like me, I know a lot of people that watch this channel are close to my age, you know, we didn't discover them until after it was over. And it's fascinating, again, looking back, you look at this story and some of the kind of accidental things that happened with the personnel especially, that created this almost perfect formula that made a band that, you know, that so many of us, years after they were broken up and we discovered them, realized just how magnificent, how amazing all of it was. And then even to this day, how that music resonates with each new generation. It's fascinating that formula that they created and how all the things kind of fell into place the way they did to create such an amazing legacy that started, you know, right here with this album, released back in the late 60s. And then went on from there. Hey, anyway, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. And please, if you're not following the channel already, please follow the channel, like the video. Love to get your comments, your feedback. Was there anything new about this article? What were your memories about when you first heard Led Zeppelin, when you were first introduced to them? What album was it? And what kind of impact did they end up having on you? And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.